Okay, good afternoon and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Again, I'm Jen Lennon with the Stelter Company. We're happy to host this webinar for you today. COVID-19 plus the CARES Act equals a change in your vision for 2020. Let's get right to our presenters today. Let's waste no time. Today presenting for us is Nathan Stelter. He's the president of the Stelter Company, and Lynn Gaumer. She's our senior gift planning consultant for the Stelter Company. I think you guys know them well. They presented many times. So if you've been with us before or work with us at the Stelter Company, you know them. So let's skip the bios. Let's get straight to the meat of the presentation today. I'll run you through the quick agenda. First, we're going to have Lynn talking about the details of the CARES Act. She'll go through that for you. And then Nathan will join, and he is going to talk about how you might need to adjust your plan giving messaging around this time with everything that's going on. And he'll give you some samples and some tips for that. And then the last half of our session, we have reserved for a Q&A, which will have two other of our experts joining us for a panel discussion. They will be addressing the questions that you all have been submitting to me for the last couple weeks. We have hundreds of them, so we're hoping to get to as many as we can today. Thank you so much for your participation in sending those in. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to Nathan. Nathan.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks everybody for taking some time today. Unbelievable times that we're all trying to navigate here, and hopefully today we can give you some ideas, maybe share some insights or observations, even from what some of your peers are doing to give you some ammunition to take back to your shops to hopefully apply and have some success in these very turbulent times. Again, as Jen mentioned, thank you so much for all the questions. Had quite a bit of questions, hundreds and hundreds of questions. So we did attempt to cover them all in our time together today. But in case we didn't, or in case there's any need for clarification post-webinar, you'll be asked if you have additional questions. Please do feel free to submit those, as we'll likely in the coming days record perhaps maybe a couple short videos and get those out to you to address some of that. So just wanted to thank everybody again. I will pass it on to Lynn to get us started.
Thanks, Nathan. Well, let's get started on the CARES Act. It stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. Just to get everybody on board, it's over 800 pages long. It was signed into law just about 10 days ago on March 27th, and it was designed to help taxpayers, businesses, and nonprofits facing economic hardship in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic and the economic downturn. Whoops. So the CARES Act was put together rather quickly, and so it does, even though these three items are the main changes that relate to charitable giving, there's still some uncertainty around them, which we're going to go over. But the first one suspends the required minimum distributions for 2020. The second creates a new universal charitable deduction, and the third one lifts the cap on cash contributions for those who itemize. So let's get started with each one of them. So the required minimum distributions have been suspended for 2020, and that was one of my questions that I received here. Did it suspend it for other years? But it is only in 2020. And what does that mean for nonprofits and donors? Well, that's good news for your retirees who may have seen their portfolios decrease in value since about mid-February or so. But the questions that I've been getting quite a bit, either through this webinar or just from our clients, is what about qualified charitable distributions? Are they still available? And the answer is yes. IRA owners are still who are over 70 and a half can make their qualified distributions. But are they going to want to do that with the decrease in the stock market and the suspension of RMD? So that's a question that a lot of us are facing right now, and whether, we certainly, do we market that? Is this something we want to be reaching out to donors about? And certainly if donors, come to you and ask you about it, you can certainly tell them that this still is available. But there might be some other strategies out there for these required minimum distributions. So In the event that you do have a donor who would maybe like to still use their IRA or their retirement plan to make a gift, given that they've lifted the cap on the cash contributions, which we're going to get to in a little bit, they could certainly take money out of their IRA or retirement plan, pay the income tax on it, and then make a cash contribution to your organization. Now, I would recommend that all of them and that you encourage your donors to have them meet with their financial advisors if they're going to be pursuing that charitable giving strategy, but it is an option for some of them. Another question I've been getting is what qualified plans are subject to this new waiver, and it's really most qualified retirement plans, including the inherited IRAs. So it does affect pretty much all of the qualified plans, and so your donors do not have to take it this year, but they certainly can take a distribution if they so desire. As far as the marketing tips go, you're going to need to review your retirement plan and qualified charitable distribution marketing material to make sure your language is clear, that the RMD requirement is waived. So here we have some suggested language, and really it's a combination between the Secure Act and the CARES Act. So that first part is how we modified the language after the Secure Act. If you remember, the Secure Act, which was put in place on January 1st of this year, increased the requirement distribution age to 72. But for those who turned 70 and a half prior to that, prior to January 1st of 2020, they were prior to the CARES Act, they were required to take their requirement distributions. So you may want to just add a note in your marketing material that that RMD requirement has been waived for 2020, and then it will be very easy to take that out when we hit 2021, assuming that they don't extend that. The next item is the universal charitable deduction, and it sounds pretty simple that it created a new $300 above the line deduction, but there's been a lot of questions around this particular provision of the CARES Act as well. One question I've been getting is whether it's a $300 above the line deduction per taxpayer or per return. Now there's experts in the field, and there's been some nice discussions over it. I do believe that it's per taxpayer. It would be $300 per taxpayer. So with a joint filing return, it would be $600. I did confirm that with Larry Katzenstein, who we work with, who is a partner at the Thompson Coburn law firm in St. Louis. And then there's been others on various CGP links that they also believe that it is a $300 per taxpayer deduction, but there's others in the field that are saying, hey, let's wait a little bit, let's get some clarity from the IRS. So that's one provision that I think we're going to kind of do a wait and see on, just to make sure that we have our information correct there. Another provision is, does it apply past 2020? Well, great question. And there's some uncertainty there as well. The actual text of the language says tax years beginning in 2020, but yet the Joint Committee on Taxation says it only predicts revenue losses through this year. So again, there's some uncertainty of whether this is going to apply in years past 2020, but at least we know that we have it for this year. It does not apply to supporting organizations or donor advised funds, so you are going to have to watch your marketing material for that. So what does it mean to nonprofits and donors? Well, as we know from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from a couple years ago, the standard deduction nearly doubled, and over 90% of taxpayers are taking that standard deduction now. So this is great for those taxpayers who may have decided not to give because they didn't get a tax incentive on it. And we all know that the donor pool has been shrinking, and we're losing out on some donors who may be in this this arena. So I think it's a great way to provide some incentive giving for these donors. And another question I've been getting is, well, this is great, but it's so small, it's $300. And so what I would say to that is that you really need to focus on the overall health of your organization and break down these silos. All of you can work together, the major gift officers, annual gift officers, to do some sort of promotion around the $300 above the line deduction. And so what's coming up on May 5th, this would be just an idea for you to maybe consider a new mini campaign, perhaps around Giving Tuesday now, which is on May 5th, or others that would promote this. And you can promote it on social media. You can have a goal of 100% participation among donors. You can have a goal of a certain dollar amount. But either way, it goes to the sustainability of your organization. And so be creative with it. I think you can have some fun with it on social media. A lot of people are on social media now and checking. And I know two of I have two kids in college, and they did something similar, not along the $300 tax deductible contribution, but they did do something similar about a little mini campaign, and they highlighted it on social media. They had some goals of getting a certain amount of donors and a certain dollar amount, and they kept putting the results like every hour, and I got wrapped into it. And by the end, I didn't think they'd make it, so I made a donation. So it was something that I think you can have fun with at this time. And the Chronicle of Philanthropy, by the way, has a recent article on this. It was highlighted on April 2nd, and it was how to make the most of Giving Tuesday now, or any giving day. So you may want to take a look at that article as well. The last item is the cash contributions and AGI. And so the new law raises the annual limit from 60% to 100% of AGI in 2020. This is a one-year gift and incentive that we have for individuals making cash contributions. So one of the questions I had, is this applying to stock? It does not, it's cash. So for corporations, the new laws raise the annual limit from 10% to 25% of taxable income. So we may see some corporate giving increase. I know we saw some corporate giving increases after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, when their corporate income tax rate was decreased. So maybe we'll see some more corporate income, corporate giving this year as a result of this provision. So now I've been getting a couple questions on how exactly this is going to apply. So first of all, it only applies to cash contributions made in 2020. So if you have an individual who gave cash contributions in 2019 and are carrying that over because of the 5-year provision, though that carryover won't apply to this provision. So they would be at the 60% under the old rule. They would not be subject to the higher 100% of AGI. Now, if a donor exceeds their adjusted gross income, that excess can be carried over in subsequent years, but assuming they only keep this provision in place for 2020, the next, so 2021's limits would apply. So they would be back, let's say, to the 60%, okay? Another question I've been getting is, well, how do donors take advantage of this? Well, it's not automatic, and it must be elected. And from what I can tell, it will probably be an election on the tax return when they file for 2020. So I'm assuming that might be a check the box or something, but it's something that they should be talking with their financial advisor about, of how they can make that election. And once again, this does not apply to supporting organizations or donor advised funds. This was really an incentive to get cash in and to help charities, and not to put aside for later use, like for a donor advised fund. So what does this mean for nonprofits and donors? Well, obviously it will mean an increase in cash donations, which is great for you. And then I've got a couple strategies, charitable gift strategies here, that you may want to think about in approaching with your donors and asking them to obviously consult with their financial advisors. But if they have had some stock decrease in recent weeks or even a couple months here, they may want to sell the depreciated stock and then make a cash gift and deduct up to 100% of the AGI. They may have some gain still, of course, in the stock market. So they can sell some depreciated stock, offset some gain, and take any cash that they have and certainly make a cash contribution towards your organization. And even if the taxpayer recognizes some capital gain, that cash gift could eliminate taxation of ordinary income. And so if it's done correctly, and if there's a large enough gift amount, they could end up paying no ordinary income tax, which would be great. So I think that this is just some things that you may want to think about in talking with your donors about making some large cash contributions. The next two items I want to talk about really are the loans to nonprofits. And although this does not go directly to giving, it certainly helps with the sustainability of your organization. And so the first one really is for nonprofits of 500 and fewer employees, and it's called the Payment Protection Program, or PPP. So these are loans of up to the lesser of $10 million, or 2.5 times the average total monthly payroll costs from a 1-year look-back period from the date of application. There's been a lot of confusion over this part of the CARES Act. And what I would recommend donors to do is to meet with their counsel and their advisors on this to make sure that they are having all of the documentation together. Most local financial institutions are serving as loan processors, and I would get those applications in fairly quickly. If you are a nonprofit of over 500, many details here are forthcoming, and I have a few details outlined here. I had a lot of questions, specific questions about individual nonprofits of whether they are eligible or not. What I would say to that is definitely, again, meet with your tax accountant or your counsel on this. With that, it was a very quick overview, but I do want to turn it over to Nathan Stelter, and he's going to talk about some marketing and messaging during this time. Nathan?
Terrific. Thanks, Lynn. And a lot of stuff. Again, we want to go through at a pretty good pace here so we can get to some of the questions that you already submitted for those who had joined later. I know GoToMeeting, Zoom, all those different tools are a little slow, so I know we had some stragglers. We will be providing a copy of this slide deck as well as a recording and some other resources after we've completed this in the next couple of days here. But to kind of check in and talk about some of the marketing and messaging that we're trying to navigate, everybody's trying to figure out. I mean, I don't know about you, but last couple of weeks it felt like a whole year. But just earlier this year, and it was January, I was on LinkedIn, read an article from Sophie Penny, Penn State, and her article was entitled "Fundraising 2020: Prepare to Pivot," which is probably the statement of the year. I think pivot will definitely fall into the word of the year, and everybody's in that area right now. And so appreciate you guys joining us. Kind of should walk you through, as you see on your screen, kind of 3 things as it relates to marketing. There's a lot of noise out there right now. There's a lot of people kind of talking about what you shouldn't do. So hopefully you're able to kind of get some access to some of those blogs, some of these webinars, and make your best decision given your organization. But as you may or may not have heard on a video we shared a week or 2 ago, there is no script for this. So we're all navigating this together. The 3 focuses for our conversation, or the second part of our conversation before our panel discussion, is really the importance of plan giving during a crisis, what we've learned maybe from past, even though this is different, but what we've learned from other 9/11, Great Recession, et cetera. Some tips for marketing during uncertain times, things that you may be already doing, things that you may want to think through, and some examples from your peers at the end. This is a question we heard a lot leading up to this, is looking for what are others doing. So we'll definitely be sure to share that. Next slide. Oh, there we go. But first things first, before jumping into a couple of those, I think that it's really critical, more than ever, to really remind ourselves about why we do what we do. We do it in everyday part of our life, and our work is putting ourselves in our donor's shoes. But now it's even more important than ever. Depending on their geography or work situation, health situation, family situation, there's a lot of anxiety given all this unknown. Just catching up with a colleague earlier today, kind of felt myself where week one being in self-quarantine, kind of felt glued to the TV, couldn't get away from news. Week two, tried to pull away from that a little bit, try to right the ship. And then, now looking at in the subsequent weeks, making the most of this time. Some unique opportunities for us all, both on the phone and those not, to slow down. But every interaction, I think a lot of folks have been reaching out saying, what is the best one thing to do? Or there isn't a boilerplate templated approach to navigate this. It really needs to be individual, based on your organization, based on the connection those important donors have to you. Are they a legacy donor already? Are they annual? Are they a member? Are they a non-donor but they've attended? I mean, each one of those different groups may look a little different. And it may be driven by type of organization. If you're in healthcare, you're obviously on the front lines, but arts are hurting very bad, and students at higher education, at colleges and universities are in a unique spot. So really, first and foremost, is that last point there is, it gives us a chance to do what we do best right now, is listen. Listen and be a good ear for those folks that you may be reaching out to, that maybe there's one or two conversations for the day that they get to have. So back to kind of the topic at hand, plan giving importance, and really spending a little time here. I've set in, probably like many of you, on a variety of webinars. I've read a lot of blogs and articles. There's been a handful of naysayers in the world of plan giving saying we need to stop and we shouldn't be doing anything. Those are largely what we've seen, people that have typically pigeonholed the plan giving world or plan giving professionals as the leave it us in your will people. Obviously, those of you on the phone and those that have spent your time and careers in this space know that plan giving is so much more, and it really is about relationships. If any of you attended the CGP National Conference in New Orleans this last year, we had a great keynote speaker, Alex Banyan. He's an author of a book called Third Door. And I really loved how he tried to crystallize what he thought that we did, because we've all had those conversations. But his statement was along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, but we are the conduit between one person's life's work and aspirations to accomplish their dreams. So this is really a great time, and I'm kind of a glasses half full kind of guy, where plan giving and all of us can shine. But first and foremost, kind of what have we learned? What have we learned from lessons from the past, and knowing full and well this is different? As I noted, there's no script for this. What we saw at 9/11 and some of what came out of that, what we saw at the Great Recession, we did see some interesting things that I think are applicable to keep in the back of your mind, to make sure the powers that be at our organizations are aware of. We saw a lot of charities, the ones that really weathered the storm the best in the Great Recession, did so because they had planted seed, or their predecessors had planted seed years and years before in plan giving. So it allowed them to really weather the storm. And those who kind of stayed the course, or actually was listening to my old mentor, Jeff Comfort. He was on a discussion with Beacon over at plangiving.com around conversations in this turbulent time. He talked about double down, and that was something when he was at Georgetown, now at Oregon State, he mentioned even during the recession. And we've seen those organizations that stayed the course, doubled down during those tough times, really see the ROI the last 5 years or so. Obviously, this is a little different. We do have a captured audience, but there are some similarities as well. When the recession hit, I remember being out on Boston College, and some of you may have heard tell the story, but Boston College's campus for the AFP Wealth and Philanthropy Summit. And they had a panel of experts talking about, during the recession, how was that impacting philanthropy and giving. And the consensus, and we've seen this since, and I think we'll see it again coming out of this or within this, is it gives people a chance to take a personal inventory. Perhaps pre-recession they were giving to 8 charities. Coming out of that, they're giving to 4. This forced slowdown which is a lot of family time for some of us, but it really is giving people a chance to pause. In fact, one of our higher ed clients just this last week shared with us they've started to receive a variety of survey results, which is terrific. Normally that's just another day in the office, but these were from a survey they had sent out in January. That somebody had sat on. Typically, most folks respond relatively quickly, but now apparently people having time, being able to read, spend time with that is paying off. Even a healthcare client of ours out in the East who started a program planting the seeds, kind of educating and building awareness of their efforts, hadn't seen a lot of success in the first year and a half or so outside of some low-hanging fruit. Just this past week saw their highest response. So people are paying attention to you. They are reading and looking at this information. And something also to be aware too is you see a couple of these Google trends that I pulled, and maybe a couple days old, but this is a 5-year window, and you've probably seen this in other discussions, and it was definitely a theme in a lot of the questions that we received. Based on what we're all dealing with, what we're all trying to navigate with our loved ones, online wills, creating a will, those topics are top of mind. And so as it's one thing, a individual donor getting information from their advisor on the importance of doing this round versus getting information from a nonprofit. So it's a balancing act, and part of what we'll talk about from massaging your message here in a little bit. But it is definitely top of mind for folks. In fact, even in New York, I know one of the things we've always seen and always has been a frustration in the planned giving world is we can get the horse to water, we can inform and educate and build awareness of these great ideas outside of the checkbook mentality to support our causes. But getting somebody to actually execute is always tough. And we've had the folks like Free Will, Net Law Legacy, all these different types of organizations coming out to try to make that execution easier. But the one sticky wicket was always, again, notarization. And so even New York actually allowed remote notarization. Yes, this was largely driven by the real estate needs, but this may be something interesting to keep our eye on as well going down the road, where some of this may be a little easier, trying to alleviate some of those barriers that we've known for so long. Another thing, as far as being mindful of planned giving and its role in a crisis, is what are some of the key concerns that we're seeing or facing individually? I mentioned some of the misperceptions perhaps that our board or leadership may have. Maybe some of those leaders who even came through major gifts that kind of pigeonhole us in this leave us in your will, which obviously, yes, typically the easiest, most popular gift, but it's really, I'd argue planned giving fundraisers are probably the best relationship builders in the world of philanthropy. And so this is really a great opportunity to do what we do best. Talking to a colleague last year, we're doing some work with a national CGP on some national standards for gift planning success. One of the frustrations for a lot of boards, a lot of powers that be when it comes to tying metrics to our world, and he stated it, I thought was terrific. He said, in the major gift world, it's really easy. You can tie some leading indicators and metrics to the work being done because a large majority of that work is done pre-gift. You can see the end result, the outcome. A large majority of the work that planned gift officers and planned giving fundraisers do is post-gift. And so it really a nice opportunity now. That stewardship that we talk about time and time again is front and center more than anything else. One thing I mentioned there, education, awareness being key. Is it appropriate to talk about planned giving? That question was really our number one submitted question, and no doubt one that a lot of you have thought through or discussed even with your teams. And that's something that we take very seriously too. In fact, some of you may have seen about a week or so ago, there was a large public university that received some backlash, and not anything ill will necessarily on theirs, but something what appeared to be, and this just to be clear, not a Stelter client, not a Stelter product, anything like that, but they had an email that went out, and I'll read just a quick excerpt, which totally innocent a month ago, but given where people's minds and hearts are right now, definitely rings a little different. It read, there's a common expression that change is the only constant in life. When we often experience this with our careers, our residences, or even families. Sometimes situations change around us, and developments in our health, laws, and our financial landscape present new challenges. In those times, it's beneficial to consider revisiting the content of your will, and et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, no ill will meant by this organization. Again, not a Stelter client, but it caught wind and ended up being picked up by a variety of news outlets and social media. So this is something you really want to be mindful of, and no doubt some of your apprehension or concern. If you had a chance to read some of our blogs or reference the video that we sent out a week or so ago, we've really been very proactive in this space, and I think something all fundraisers and those of you on the line should be as well. When we first started seeing this coming down the road, we actually created, with our creative director, editorial director, and a couple other folks, a war room of sorts where we proactively went into every piece of content that was going to be going out and looking for, and these are some things to keep in mind for yourself, phrases or words, things that may have been totally fine a month or so, but it may fall a little tone deaf now. In fact, we found some where it said, is your 2020 off to a satisfying start? How do you want to be remembered? Are you sick of ... Obviously not intended to, be in poor form when they were written, but didn't make sense now. So we've been actively changing that. Another thing to be mindful of with your outreach and marketing is your images. Being really thoughtful, and I've caught myself thinking this when I've watched TV or something, and I think I even saw an American Idol last night or the night before with my kids where they said pre-recorded. This was recorded before, because those images of people shaking hands in big groups, happy travelers, that can be really tough for people to get their head around right now. So again, some things to be mindful of. Again, you can still talk about and tell great stories in plan giving without actually, quote unquote, having to ask. And if you're not out there doing it, as my mentor Jeff Comfort says, somebody else will be. In fact, one of our clients a couple weeks ago gave us the quote, we still have to operate our business. If we stop asking, they're going to stop giving. It may be less and it may be fewer, but you can't take your foot off the gas. It's especially important now. People are Googling estate planning, how to make a will. This is fresh on people's minds. Again, we're all thinking about that. We're all aware of that, but how do we approach that? And that's why this third point under this kind of bullet around the long plays is so important to not only remind ourselves, but remind our staff, our boss, board, donors, that really the idea of what we're trying to accomplish here is meant for the long haul. And that may be hard right now for people to get their head around. We're living in very much a day-to-day, week-to-week setting, but it is important for us to address and where appropriate, be able to be empathetic, obviously, too. Another one of our clients actually shared just the other day. No doubt a lot of you on the phone have probably been on Zoom. We were going to do a Zoom call, but probably safer to do it via GoToMeeting. Great opportunity for some of those frontline fundraisers who may not have been having conversations around plan gifts to do some Zoom training with them as well. So there's a lot of important things from a long play standpoint to be mindful of. It's not necessarily the time, as far as the opportunities that present there, it's not necessarily the time to talk or lead with vehicle conversations. It's okay to have those conversations if it's somebody that's been in your pipeline, somebody you've been talking to or prompted by them. But again, leading with mission, impact, empathy, being able to tie those stories together is really kind of the critical thing for us right now. As we kind of cruise along here, so we'll have some time for our panel and all the great questions. Some marketing tips, obviously giving some context around what we've learned in the past and what we're seeing now is all fine and good. But you're likely looking for some ideas of what you should be doing with your marketing, or perhaps you're still even asking if you should be marketing. I will tell you, just given experience, given what we're seeing with our clients, we're doing some pulse surveys with our clients. A majority of our clients are not missing a beat. They're making some minor tweaks to messaging. Some may have delayed a couple weeks to kind of see, all right, well, what's the next week going to look like? But many are staying very true to that. And it's really tough sometimes. Your instinct may be to retreat from sending, outreach or having some of that connection. One of the things that, hearing other webinars and even what we've seen firsthand is you need to resist as best you can. History has proven that, those nonprofit leaders who really take a scalpel to kind of address and tweak their marketing as opposed to a cleaver and chop it all off, reap those rewards in the long haul. So, one of the things you see on the screen here is thinking about the golden rule of crisis management. Be proactive, get ahead of the story, show your human side, prepare to act differently or pivot. And so these phases you see here is likely what your donors have been seeing from you already. There was that initial push by everybody to, hey, this is what we're doing to continue the great work that you've entrusted us to do, making sure your CEO, your president, whoever may be getting that information out there. And then the following week or some variation of that, we're here. We're thinking of you. Please let us know how we can help. And a lot of people have already gone through those cycles, but a lot of people right now are finally stuck at kind of that phase 3. That what now? And so that's some of the ideas I want to share with you in kind of the coming slides here and then some of the examples. As I mentioned earlier, stewardship. This is really kind of our key time. For those that have been in plant giving a while, we all know, and those who have somehow made it to this industry, stewardship is really at the core of plant giving. Yet time and time again, I know we all say we don't have enough time to do it. So I feel like we've been giving a little bit of time here. I will note, though, and everybody has a different definition of stewardship, that it is important to be thoughtful around how you're approaching the stewardship in bad times or in uncertain times, as we're dealing with now, is much different than stewardship in good times, where it was, a large event we're putting on or some recognition. The stewardship that I think a lot of us are looking at and doing one-on-one right now is really just an awesome chance to show our humanity, to really truly connect with donors on a personal level, to further build those relationships. I would imagine, talking with a lot of clients, you've likely already done some of these things, personally calling probably all your Legacy Society members, perhaps even personally calling, reaching out to your portfolio. I know a couple of folks already going through that twice. But kind of what's next? What are some of the other things? Nice side note from a client that shared with us, been calling donors and prospects to see how they're doing, leaving messaging, sending follow-up emails where appropriate. People have been very appreciative of us reaching out. An unanticipated positive income is that this has given us an opportunity to have discussions with prospects in a non-threatening, non-solicitation format that's allowed us to build on these relationships for the future. So there may be some really great opportunities, again, to do some of the soft skill work that we all love to do. Framing and context is critical too. I mentioned that earlier with some of that, and I'll show some examples of how some of our clients are going towards or trying to maneuver around that as well. Something like, I mentioned plan for the future, importance of an updated will. Typical language that a lot of folks use in this world. We want to be mindful of what the perception may be on those types of things. Acknowledging what's going on, providing the context is totally fine, totally normal, but I think one of the biggest things I can emphasize is don't dwell. A lot of, the more and more people dwell, the more analysis paralysis can happen, but it is important for us to be that bended ear for our clients. Because as I mentioned, life has slowed way down. As our CEO put it, it's an opportunity to act with cautious confidence right now. Being authentic, asking questions, being transparent even. It's okay to include language like, as of today, we're down 20% year over year, or due to the closure of XYZ program, we estimate 50% of people won't be served this, or we've lost this type of revenue. If you're talking to the right people that care about you deeply, those are things that they're going to want to be made aware of. The other couple things to kind of keep in the back of your mind, and then I'll show you some examples of what some of this looks like in practice, is right now it's a point in time. While it's felt like it's a year has passed in the past couple of weeks, what happens tomorrow, what happens next week, what happens a week after is still very much unknown. And so it's important to kind of think through who are you talking to? Who are the most important people that you have on your list? We always talk about lists. The list is really the key to anything we do in the marketing world. But now I think it's more critical than ever. Being able to identify those folks who are near and dear to you based on their previous commitments, people who have raised their hand in the past, people who have been involved on a couple different levels. I think this is a good opportunity, and I don't know if anybody still does, what people did 15, 20 years ago, the old spray and pray approach. But I would be really mindful on not sending everything to everybody right now. Being thoughtful, being relevant, and being on message is really important. The other side of something, if you haven't already thought about this, it will be definitely on your radar in the near future, is what do face-to-face meetings look like? So many of us, we're on the road, we're in living rooms, we're sitting down having conversations. No time in the near future, at least, is that going to be available? Is that going to be an opportunity? Even when, things are lifted, it's going to be very, very hard for some of our donors, especially the ones we're talking about this, to allow us into their rooms. So one thing we've seen that's been amazingly well, and I know some of you on the line have seen this as well, is there's a great chance to extend some of your discovery from your, really the comfort of your home office through surveys. A lot of us have been using surveys in a variety of different ways, but it really, if they're written the right way, they should be an extension of the questions or conversations you'd be having face-to-face anyway. And no doubt, your frontline gift officers, whether it's planned giving or major gift even, they've gone through their stewardship calls and are probably looking at, all right, what's the next step? This can be another tool to engage folks, get them sharing what they care about, and get them to raise their hand. A couple questions came up in the pre-seminar, pre-webinar request around legacy challenges, whether you're in the midst of a challenge or launching one. If you missed it a couple weeks ago, we had the great folks from George Washington University on a webinar talking about what they've done, and some of those questions came up then too. And there was an interesting observation where, again, depending on where you're at in that challenge, going to the donor or the person who has funded that challenge and seeing if there's a chance to pivot in regards to where those dollars go may be a great opportunity to try to make some good come out and have an opportunity to share with folks, hey, this is something we can do right now at no cost to you. Just let us know if you've done something like this. And then finally, I share collaborate with teams. We all talk about trying to collaborate more with others and piggyback messages and blend them. We have seen so much of our planned giving outreach start taking different forms in regards to emergency student funds, in regards to how people can help in these areas. And then as you see below, when personal conversations allow DAFs, percentage designations, as we saw in the tail end of the Great Recession, became more popular than a dollar amount. I feel like we'll see the same thing here, as well as gift annuities and life income. So I'll walk you through a couple quick examples, and then we'll have 15 minutes to do a quick round robin. We may go a little longer, so if you do have some availability or flexibility on your schedule, please stay with us. It will be recorded if you want to bounce back in and see that. First one I share is from our good friends at Syracuse, and I think this is really stewardship at its finest. Through working with our principal account executive that works with them here at Stelter, Libby Felton, they realized, hey, when all this started happening, they had already printed a newsletter, had some marketing already in queue, ready to drop. And so wanted to get ahead of that, wanted to really make sure the donors that they were thinking of what that was going to look like once it reached the inbox. So quickly put together a postcard. We're able to get that out to them. We're thinking of you. Over the next week or so, you may see this. It was sent ahead of time. Please understand, this was just meant to provide ideas. So I thought that was a great example of being nimble, being flexible. Another client of ours, and if you have some examples or things that are happening that are very personal to your organization and to your donors, more importantly, that you're already going to celebrate, Earth Day here, celebrating, 50 years, and being able to tie back, or I guess going back to the word pivot, your messaging to be appropriate given the needs that are being faced today. So being mindful of what are some of the things, you may not have to scrap certain things that were already in flight, but what are some other ways to pivot with that to stress the urgency of some of those needs now. Another example, again, when you're thinking of your messaging in your letters, if your mission allows, and this isn't, not every organization can tie to the pandemic that we're going through right now, but if it does, there may be an opportunity to make it appropriate to the crisis and even allow for urgency. We know urgency is something in our world of planned giving that is fleeting at the very least. Donors are just like us, procrastinate. So, if there is an opportunity, being mindful on how you're connecting the dots as well. And then the next example I really like, wherein this was an email for a hospital client of ours that was all queued up, had been approved by the client, and actually one of our senior content strategists, Casey, called us out to the client saying, hey, I think there's some things we could do smarter here. And so what you're seeing on your screen right now and blurred out really was the subject line said start here, plan for the future. Offer was around estate planning starters. And then there's an intro, learn how you can create your estate plan or update an existing one with this helpful guide. Again, a month or two ago, totally fine. As you'll see with the next one, what she was able to do is address really and tie it to the mission, tie it to the work that they're doing. Subject line, changing it to simple ways to help kids at XYZ charity. The offer, simple ways to help. The introduction, a personal introduction, obviously leading with thanking them, talking about how their work won't change and the commitment that they have to these children and their families. So really a great way to still have a touch, still be engaged with the donor, but not make it about the ask, not make it about the thing. Another quick example, and this again being mindful of where you're at in your organization, but CGAs may play a good role. I know on GiftPL or CGP Link, I saw a couple of threads going back and forth with folks talking about the importance of sending letters out to current annuitants and making sure that they understand in this turbulent times those payments are still going to be safe. Another example here of talking about, based on who your most loyal folks are, by interest, by affinity, maybe even demonstrated capacity, unique ways to support the mission in turbulent times. And then finally, and then we'll bring in our editorial director to host a little panel here. An example, I really loved what Georgia State did here. Again, being very, I think simplicity is something I can't echo enough with your messaging. It's not a time to send out 30 different messages to somebody, but really be tight, honest, transparent, upfront. Don't assume that because they've been on your email or print list for years that they've read anything. Likely you have a lot of new eyes looking at you right now. And so, leading with empathy, being explicit about why they're receiving this, what this is, and why it's important. So I will stop talking so we can try to hammer through some of these questions here. Katie, on to you.
Hi, thanks so much, Nathan. This is Jen. I just wanted to come back in and thank you and Lynn, and then introduce our other two members of our panel. Katie Parker, our editorial director, will be joining us to moderate the discussion, and Zach Christensen is our director of marketing and our creative director, and he'll also be on the panel to answer some of your questions. And as Nathan just mentioned, we did go longer on the presentation portion than we planned to, so we will go a little longer in the Q&A. If you have time to stick with us for that, that's great. And if not, we will be recording it, so you can tune into that later. And now I'll hand it off to you, Katie.
Wonderful. This is Katie Parker, and I'm going to moderate some of the questions we received both ahead of the webinar, as well as some themes we saw as we were talking. The first one, Lynn, I'm going to surprise you with, came up as we were talking, but I found myself taking notes as well, is can you re-mention the Giving Tuesday Now, the Give Tuesday Now article that you brought up?
Yes, that was from the Chronicle of Philanthropy. It was on April 2nd, I believe, and it did give some tips on what to do for Giving Tuesday Now. You can also go on to the Giving Tuesday website and get some more information on that. But again, it would be a great time as it's coming up here. And I think, maybe we will be over the hump, so to speak, of this virus, and it might be a time where people are starting to think, okay, we're going to get through this and start feeling good about this and helping charities.
Wonderful. I'm going to keep you talking, Lynn, because the legal side of this is really important to the people who submitted questions. So I've got 3 rapid fire, and I can review them as you answer them. But Loretta wants to know, how does CARES change donor advised funds, or is there no significant change? Rebecca wants to know which donor segments are likely to benefit the most from CARES as far as the charitable deduction. And Hart wants to know, since this excludes supporting organizations and DAFs, what about CRTs and CGAs in relation to that AGI charitable tax deduction? So take you back up to that first question, was donor advised funds. What do you see happening?
Yeah, so both the $300 deduction, or the $300 contribution, universal deduction, and the cash contribution to lifting the limit to 100% of AGI, they do not include donor advised funds. So somebody would not be able to take advantage of those incentives to donor advised funds. As far as talking with individuals about donor advised funds, as we know, donor advised funds have been on the rise, both in terms of dollars and donors for several years now. And so there's a lot of value and assets in those donor advised funds, and they are a great asset to continue the gift conversation and normalize that plan, that giving plan, because obviously those assets are already in the donor advised fund waiting to make some recommendations there. So no tax incentives essentially for the donor advised funds, but definitely something that you may want to be mentioning to your donors who already have the donor advised funds, and the funds are already there to make the grant recommendations.
Number 2 was, which donor segments are most likely to benefit from the charitable deductions?
Yeah, so I would say definitely the higher net worth and that cash gift and increasing it to 100% of the AGI. Definitely, I think that is a huge incentive, especially for like your major gift officers, annual gift officers, and even your plan giving officers, to make those large cash contributions for those high net worth donors. But at the same time, I think with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and increasing the standard deduction so much, we did lose many donors in that low to mid level. And maybe they've dropped off your radar, and maybe it's time to come back. And so from that respect, I think you could get back some donors who maybe have dropped off in the past couple of years.
And Lynn, the final of the three was about CRTs and CGAs. Are they eligible for the 100% AGI?
No, those are only cash gifts to public organizations. So the unlimited deduction for cash gifts are to charities that fall under that 170B1A of the tax code. And so a contribution to a split interest trust would not qualify.
I'm going to take us back to Nate as we take on the CARES discussion. Nate, a lot of people want to know about the marketing side. Brisbane asked, how and when should we communicate anything about the new CARES Act? Will it seem opportunistic? And Mark similarly wanted to know, how do you think the CARES Act will affect philanthropic giving? He was interested in the senior donors in particular. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, good questions. And I think, like anything, the opportunity is to get information out to folks as quickly as possible. Obviously there's been a flurry of activity, as Lynn discussed with the CARES Act, a lot, what is it, 800 pages, something like that. So I think it's important to get some of those reminders out to them. I know we've had a handful of clients, obviously, as the importance and attractive nature of QCDs has been over the last couple of years, with legislation being permanent, that the suspension of RMDs will, it's still a good giving option, may not necessarily be as attractive. So being mindful of what does your content read, are you leading people the right direction? So I think now more than ever, it's an opportunity. I just saw, as we're sitting here, saw on LinkedIn, one of our friends and clients at West Virginia University shared some of their information on the CARES Act, just to get that out in front of their alumni constituents. So again, being a resource now more than ever is really important, making sure it's informational, educational, as opposed to being a solicitation, I think is the proper course.
I'm going to take one back to Lynn. This came from Bobby, and it's the question I think we all want to know. Is it possible that the CARES Act will have any addendums or updates as COVID-19 may progress or increase? We have Lynn on mute, getting her all set up again.
Sorry about that. There was some news. Marco Rubio, senator from Florida, was coming out, and he does feel that there's going to be essentially a fourth relief bill. So the CARES Act was actually number 3. And so he thinks there's actually going to be a fourth, hopefully helping nonprofits along the way. I will say that also there has been some new legislation introduced called the SOS Act, the Save Organizations That Serve America Act. This was introduced by Representatives Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania and Seth Moulton from Massachusetts. And this will provide emergency funding for nonprofits, as well as create the universal charitable deduction and continue that on. So I am hopeful that that $300 is just a start for that universal charitable deduction and will be expanded further, but only time will tell.
Zach, your turn. I have one that I just suspect you're going to elaborate on, so I'm going to send this your way. From Michelle. Is it even appropriate to go down the road of IRA stock giving for the rest of the year, given the economic losses and volatility?
I would say that if you're in conversations currently about these giving vehicles, then yes. But in general, of course, you need to have, the tone right there, especially if you're going back on conversations. But in general marketing efforts, I would steer clear of specific gift vehicle marketing. I'd really focus on the stories of need, stories of how your mission has been successful over the past year, and let the giving connection go through there. once they've shown interest, once they've reached out to you, let the conversation around giving lead you to the vehicle that makes the most sense for them and their philanthropic goals.
I love that. I'm going to piggyback what you were answering there for Sue Ellen, who asked, what should our focus in fundraising be in the next 6 months or so? And I really think what you've heard our discussion talk about is this sense of stewardship, community, thanking, and coming together. And you have the unique opportunity to reconfirm the donor's values, which right now more than ever is protecting their family, taking care of their own assets, and that's immediate and future. So bringing forward the values match proposition that you have. They're connected to your org. They feel that your mission is worthy. And as their heart matches your mission, I think it's really important to lead with that and talk about that at this time beyond the gift vehicles. Here's one more gift vehicle question though for you because it's all relative right now. But Lynn, back to you. William wants to know, what's the prediction for the future of gift annuity rates?
Oh, great question, William. So the ACGA conference is the 3rd week of April here. It will be virtual, and they always have a rates luncheon, and that rates luncheon is scheduled to take place on April 21st at noon. I believe it's Eastern time. They will take a look at rates and make an announcement at that time. And given the current economic climate, the CMFR rate, they look at a variety of factors, but it is starting to show signs that they could decrease the rates at that time. If they do, it would be a good opportunity to reach out to maybe some of the donors you've been having conversations with about CGAs to let them know that, because it would most likely the new rates would take effect if they did make a rate adjustment on July 1st. So you would have a couple months there to create some marketing material around that rates will be maybe perhaps decreasing, and to put a CGA in place now. So stay tuned, but April 21st will be the announcement of whether rates will either stay the same, go up, or go down.
Thank you. I loved earlier, Nate, how you talked about how the planned giving officer's job begins when the gift is closed. I'm going to take this one to Zach about our Legacy Society members. Rebecca wants to know, what should we do specifically for them right now?
Yeah, like Nate had mentioned, I think it's a great time to check in with them, see how they're doing, provide regular updates of what's going on within your organization, and talk about the new innovative things you're doing from perhaps your new home workspace. I've seen a lot of development officers, specifically on LinkedIn and even on Facebook, making personalized videos of themselves and their teams, just again, providing updates of where their organizations are at right now. I've also seen a huge uptick in Facebook Live events. My wife is actually in development, as some of you might know on this call. She works for our local botanical gardens. They're kind of pivoting right now, to use the word of the day, looking at taking their Blues in the Garden event online, some of their educational events into Facebook Live. So really, I think using new technologies, all of the things that we have kind of in our quiver right now, just to expand on what's going on within our organization, and the need for support still remains.
For those of you eyeing the clock, I have 3 more groups of questions that I'd love for you to hear the answers to. So that's where we're headed. This one came from Adam. I'm going to take it. He wants to know, how would you recommend approaching offers within digital communications this spring? It's an attempt to be sensitive to the real needs and concerns of our donors, while also providing an opportunity for our institutions to measure the impact of our communications. That is a heady question. I would also start with this idea that right now, the risk reward of email is high. Email is the most likely to go viral other than your social media accounts. That's an opportunity for a donor to put it out there in a negative space. And we gave an example of that earlier. But you also have to be in the space of that donor. They might be multitasking as they go through email. They might be dealing with other stressors. Think of that work from home person who's got a kid around that might be tagging at them as well. So put your headspace right there and really read your email in today's mode. We talked about the war room and trigger words, and truly those are changing every day. With email, you have the very unique opportunity to read it almost at the same moment your donor is. So make sure it feels good to you. But all the advice we've been giving about stewardship, thanking, making it about them is still valid and important in this digital space. and simple messaging is going to win out. It's the time for simplicity and being there for your donors. There can also be some tools that you can provide to them. As we talk about stewardship, they may want kind of an estate planning organizer. Can you talk about how supporters like them felt value in this kind of a tool and offer it to them in context of the fact that you understand they're in uncertain times? So some thoughts for you there. Zach, I've got two for you back to marketing. Some specifics here. Kelly wants to know if you have any specific tactics for healthcare organizations that they can use in light of COVID. And any just trends overall that you're seeing during this crisis. Are people pulling the plug or marching on?
Well, I'll start with the second one there. I've seen a little bit of both. Are people pulling out, or are they continuing to march forward? And I would say a majority are continuing to march forward. I see a lot of arts organizations that, rely on that, money in the door, dollars in the door on a daily basis, pull back a little bit to really refocus their efforts on, providing money for now. But again, I think for the most part, people are moving forward, but really with an eye on the content, like we've mentioned time and time again. How is this framed for the person that's reading it? And as for the other question, what I've seen from healthcare organizations, I think this is an opportunity to shine. I know Katie and her team have really been looking at messages for organizations that are, COVID adjacent versus detached from COVID. And I really love, and I've seen some really great examples of people showing what they're doing now in the midst of all of this. How are things changing? How have doctors' visits changed? What are they doing to protect patients currently? So really just, again, it's keeping a finger on the pulse of what's happening now and really turning that message into, it's because of generous supporters in years past that have the foresight to bring these gifts now into the future. So yeah, keep going with it.
I have one final question. It's a big one. It's heading to you, Nate. This is from Lynn, not our Lynn, but this Lynn would like to know, and they're using your word, recommendations on pivoting our strategic plan to meet the current environment.
Yeah, I think there are going to be, as I mentioned a couple of times, I think a lot of silver lining good things that may come out of this forced a chance to slow down, reflect, look at new ways to engage with folks, and look at new ways to, as we're all doing, work remotely and be flexible and nimble, maybe more so than some of the old tried and true processes had allowed us in our shops in the past. So I feel like there's going to be quite a few different things coming out of this. The timeline on which, whether it's short term or long term, I think will be tied closer to the type of organization, the size, complexity of organization. But I do think, and we're already seeing just some of the, even as Zach mentioned, the innovative, out-of-the-box ideas people are thinking about to build better relationships, to be more empathetic than maybe we've had a chance to do because we're running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So I think, there's a lot of kind of a stay tuned there as we all kind of go through the next 6 to 12 to 18 months. But I definitely am bullish that there's going to be some really nice things come out of this.
Great, thanks, Nate. This is Jen. I'm going to go ahead and break in. We are about 5 after the hour, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So thanks so much to Nathan, Lynn, Katie, and Zach. And if you didn't get your question answered and you really have something that you would like their opinion on, they have offered to talk to you personally through their email. And you see their email on the screen there. Nathan.Stelter, Lynn.Gaumer, Katie.Parker, and Zach.Christensen, all at stelter.com. So feel free to reach out to them if you have a question, burning question that you would like their opinion on. And then finally, another question we receive a lot of is, can I get the slides? I missed that last slide. I wanted to screen grab it. Can we go back? Can we get the recording? And the answer to both of those questions is yes, we are recording this, and I will be posting the recording with the handouts on our website at stelter.com/webinars. Look for that to be in place this week yet. And I will be sending you an email once it's ready. So if you just want to wait for my email and head there then, you can, or if you're just super anxious, you can check it out yourself, stelter.com/webinars. So thanks so much for joining us. We had close to 700 of you that made it into the call today. Thanks for coming and spending the last hour with us and for submitting your questions. It was a great discussion, and we hope that you feel like it was time well spent. And we will hope to talk to you again soon. And I think, yeah, that's it. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.